Welcome to iHeartRadio's CEO Unplugged. I'm Joe Bartlett. Our guest today, David Weild, the founder and chairman and CEO of Weild & Company, an investment banking firm. David is also the past vice chairman of NASDAQ. So welcome, David. You claim that you have revolutionized investment banking by bringing Wall Street to Main Street, and I'd like to talk to you about that today. What does that mean?
Well, I would say that we haven't done it yet. We're in the process of revolutionizing investment banking, and what it is that if you go back probably over the last 20 years, there were 138 investment banks that did smaller initial public offerings, and then that number today is down to about 31. Most of those banks are out of business that serve the middle market. So what we want to do is there's a massive void for these kinds of services, and we're taking a radically different model and allowing people to work anywhere in the United States. We're now in 15 different states and the District of Columbia, and we expect at some point here we'll be in all 50 states and international.
I would think, given the current situation, little people just can't make it in the market. You've got to be huge.
Well, there is that, and you need massive resources if you're going to serve these smaller companies. You need to tap into a bigger platform. So we're in the process of trying to create that platform so that, for example, a woman who left Wall Street to go have kids, the last one's in first grade, wants to work right now. Her choice, she lives in the suburbs, is to become the 60th residential real estate broker. We'd like her to be able to use her skills, plug into our network remotely, and to be able to collaborate through our portal.
The thing about investment these days is, you have the big guys out there, and it's done in milliseconds. It's done in huge bulk. How do people compete with that?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, first, we're focused on mergers and acquisitions and private placements right now. We do public market advisory, and we actually don't trade, public securities, if you will. But I have an expertise in that, having been former vice chairman of NASDAQ. And it's a great question. It's very difficult because many times the people with the computers and the speed win. And you can see massive amounts of money being spent by high-frequency traders just to get a couple of nanoseconds edge and get in front of other people's orders. And I think that this is something that the Securities and Exchange Commission is really trying to work through. There is something now called the Consolidated Audit Trail, or CAT, which they're in the process of trying to implement so that with all this complexity, they can actually see who is the source of individual quotes and other traffic so that they can ramp up if you will, oversight and compliance. So I think they're moving in the right direction.
I think you mentioned that there's been a reduction in the number of IPOs lately. For example, I have a friend who has a great product idea, and he's trying to get it off the ground. Needs just a couple of $1 million, but it's hard to raise that. But he says to me that, well, if I get that $1 million and I build it out, people will give me $20 million.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And the first capital is always the hardest
right.
capital. And also, if you're a regulated entity, we're a FINRA member firm, Financial Regulatory Authority. We have real requirements in terms of due diligence and other things. And so smaller deals are economically unviable for FINRA member firms. I mean, that's where things like crowdfunding, friends and family come in hand. I mean, actually, if you look at poor people in this country, one of the reasons why crowdfunding doesn't work for poor people is because most financing of startups gets done by friends and family. And if your friends and family are poor, you don't have access to capital. So one of the things that I'd like to go back to Congress for is to get a tax credit for investors that have money to invest in companies that are based in areas and keep jobs in targeted economic development zones that are largely populated by people. I mean, some people would say we have too much capitalism. I believe we have too little capitalism in this country, but we need to get the incentives in the right place. And if we do, then get out of the way, let the market react, and let people put their money into ideas that are actually going to lift people up and solve the great challenges of our time.
We're talking to David Weild, the founder and chairman, CEO of Weild & Company, a private investment banking firm. You were talking about helping the middle class, and I'm kind of curious what brought you into this focus now.
Well, I have a real I mean, I've always been somebody that I think it's as much pleasure, maybe more pleasure out of other people's successes than necessarily my own. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. Too much politics right now is zero-sum. I win, you lose, and I think that really the focus needs to be on growing the pie, not how big is my slice of the pie. I think everybody will do a heck of a lot better if we all take that attitude. That said, I've been very successful down on the Hill because I like working with Democrats. I like working with Republicans. I think that there are ways that you can create wins for the Democrats and wins for Republicans in the same policies. So, for example, last year we had a massive piece of legislation that was spearheaded by the then chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Jeb Hensarling. Now the Republicans lost control of the House, so Maxine Waters took over as chair. I thought it was very instructional that Maxine and Jeb actually worked very well together. So the last piece of legislation that they put through the House actually passed 406 to 4, and it was a 30-some-odd point piece of capital markets legislation that people were referring to as Jobs Act 3.0. Unfortunately, it got pushed into the next Congress when the president decided that he was going to hold up the budget appropriation to build the wall, which, of course, then meant that there was no financing, and the Senate was supposed to have tacked that bill onto the budget appropriation. So we got set back to square one. That said, there is some real interest in people getting together and solving some of these problems. I just get concerned that so much of the intramurals that go on distract people from the real work of government, and I really wish we would get focused on things that matter to the people.
I think we all feel that way. Do you have any idea where the new areas of investment might be? Some place where people can get in early, like an early Apple or a Facebook or a Google. Where are we looking at now?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of innovation going on in financial technology platforms. We're working with a little company that I co-founded called Investicure, which is what they do is it's an Acorns-like platform, which is spare change investing, but they want to do it to focus raising capital to drive high social impact. In this case, Alzheimer's disease, which is a looming crisis for the United States with the aging of the population. And so, we're hopeful that if they get capitalized and scale, that they'll be able to raise upwards of $1 billion a year to go into the death valley of financing for Alzheimer's and maybe forward these problems in the future. So we see a lot of that kind of thing. I mean, that's really what we're interested in. A lot of it occurs in life sciences area. This is a fintech play, actually, so it doesn't have regulatory approval risk. So in some respects, it's, you get leverage on your money in terms of social impact in life sciences because it's raising lots of money. So it's an interesting investment that way. If you go further afield, I mean, obviously, renewable energy is an interesting place. We would expect at some point that legislation would support that because everybody understands that there's a threat from global warming and we have to do something to take down CO2 emissions.
So obviously you're a very driven man, a very successful man. I always like to find out what people like you do when they're not working. It's hard, I think, sometimes for people to not work. When you're a driven individual, do you find downtime or any time to just sort of forget about things?
Well, I play the piano a little bit. It's a little bit of my mental therapy.
Yeah,
but
right.
But I'm really interested in my free time in kids, and I was for a long time. I was the chairman of the board of Tuesday's Children. I'm now chairman emeritus. It was the organization that's been taking care of 9/11 kids that lost a parent on 9/11, and we broadened the mandate as they got closer to going into college to include U.S. military families who had lost a loved one, Gold Star families, first responders, and we also used our balance sheet to create the Resiliency Center of Newtown, Connecticut, in the wake of that horrible crisis, and have provided support in the wake of some of these mass murders. So I'm all about it. I love going to my kids' events. I was at a baseball game for my son last night. I saw my other two, my twins, sing in the chorus last night. So
that's good. You got to have that family time.
that's right.
Finally here, do you have any advice for just the average young person who maybe wants to start a business? I'm sure it's very challenging at this point.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that you really need to achieve a market test, which is to say bringing in other people's money. Even if you have money, right, you're much better off getting other people to help back your idea. That helps you vet and that the idea actually is meritorious. If you can't get other people to invest in it, then it probably doesn't deserve to be done. And but also, don't get started too early. I think sometimes, if you really want to become an entrepreneur and be successful, mentor with somebody who's a successful entrepreneur. Go into a business which is scaling. Learn the ropes, okay? There's a lot to be learned about what can go wrong. And listen to people that have been there, done it, and been successful. There's nothing more important in a business than investing in the jockey, more so than the horse. I'd rather see a B idea with an A management team than an A idea with a B management team.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Is there a place where people can find some more information about you or get in touch with you if they'd like some advice?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. We have a website. It's weildco.com, and you can find our contact information up on the site. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I respond to people that reach out to me.
Excellent. It's a pleasure speaking to you. David Weild, founder and chairman, CEO of Weild & Company, here on iHeartRadio CEO Unplugged. I'm Joe Bartlett.